Welcome back. This lens that I'm holding in my hands is the Sirui Aurora 85mm f1.4 full frame autofocus lens. And if you know Sirui have been doing cameras accessory for the last couple of decades, I guess, if I'm not wrong. And they've been manufacturing a lot of tripods. As a matter of fact, I have a lot of their tripods, and the one that is holding my camera right now, the one that is recording me, is a Sirui tripod. So I've been knowing the company for a long time. But if you follow the market, you know that they have entered a few years ago the market of lenses, and they started with manual focus lenses, anamorphic manual focus lenses. Then they moved into APS-C autofocus lenses, and now they are entering the full-frame autofocus lenses market with this 85mm f1.4, which, apologies for the spoiler, it's a great lens, because for the MSRP of $599, but today with their launch campaign, you can purchase it for $499, link in the description below. You get an 85mm f1.4. You also get two filters, a black mist filter and a UV filter, that are gonna come for free if you purchase it as part of the launch campaign. And you get a very good 85mm lens, which also happens to be one of the most lightweight and compact that you can get. Now, my usual disclaimer. Sirui sent me this lens to review and I get to keep it. But as usual, no money changed hands. This is not a sponsored video by Sirui. They just provided me the lens, but they don't get to tell me what to say. They don't know what I'm gonna say. They're discovering what I think the same moment that you are, because they're watching this review together with you guys. So I just wanted to be clear in that regard. As a side note, this is the Sony E-mount version, but this lens is also available for Nikon Z-mount and for Fujifilm X. Of course, on a Fujifilm X, this becomes a much longer focal length, so it's a different type of lens, but in this case, we're gonna focus on the Sony E-mount version. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into the review of this lens, which, as I said, it's a pretty interesting one. From a construction standpoint, this lens is built very well, because the barrel is made of aluminum alloy and it's very solid. You can like, once you get it in your hands, you can definitely feel that it's very well built. But despite that, this lens weighs only 540 grams, which is basically 1.2 pounds, if I'm not doing the math wrong. It's a very lightweight lens. It's probably one of the most lightweight at 85mm f1.4 lens. And they're getting to this weight in portability because even the size, you see, it's not that big. They're not cutting corners. They're not skimping on features, build quality, or anything. This lens, as I mentioned, is made of aluminum, is weather sealed. You have a gasket at the bottom at the camera mount. You have plenty of controls. You have an autofocus, manual focus switch. You have an autofocus lock, an AFL function button. You have an aperture ring that is declicked. See? Super smooth, or by moving a dial, it becomes click, and the clickiness of the aperture is perfect. It's not too loose, not too tight. It's very easy to use and very difficult to accidentally move it. I don't know how to explain that better. So very well built. You also have your typical manual focus ring, which is very smooth, very easy to use. Now, I don't manual focus that much, so I'm not gonna waste any time on telling you how it works, because I don't know. I just only know that it's smooth. And of course, with the lens, you also get the plastic lens hood that is decent size, not too big. It also handles pretty well on my Sony a7R5, which you would expect, but also handles pretty well on the a7CR, which is a much smaller camera, which in theory should be better with small lenses. This is not big. This is very easy to handle, and even with a smaller camera, it does pretty well. From an optical standpoint, this lens comes with 14 elements in 9 groups. Some of them were specifically designed to maintain size and weight under control. You get one ED glass, you get one extreme aspherical glass, and 3 high refractive index glasses. Again, all of those are specifically made to contain size and weight. But most noticeably, what is the main, not the main selling point, but the most important optical thing that this lens has is the aperture. The aperture is made of 15 rounded blades, and if you've listened to any review, you kind of know that the more aperture blades, especially if they're rounded, the better the bokeh comes out. We're gonna see that when we talk about the image quality, but you should expect a very good bokeh out of this lens. And last but not least, on the bottom of the lens, with the lens mount, you get a USB-C port that allows you to update your firmware very, very easily. A lens can be affordable, very well built, lightweight, feature packed like this, but if the image quality isn't there, it's worth nothing. Now, I'm happy to report that this lens does really, really well when it comes to image quality. And starting from sharpness on a 61 megapixel sensor. The lens is really sharp, already wide open in the center of the frame, while the corners lag a little bit behind. There's a little bit of vignetting, which is something you should expect with any 85mm f1.4. As you stop down, the vignetting kind of goes away. At f2, you get an image boost, especially in the center, and once you get to f2.8, even the corners start to be really, really good. The sharpness is top-notch already at f2.8, and once you get to f4, the corners are really, really good, and at 5.6, you can get pretty much an even image corner to corner. Now, the fact that when the lens is wide open, the corners are not as sharp as the center of the frame, and there's a little bit of vignetting. One is to be expected with any portrait lens. They kind of all do the same thing. Two, it's not an issue, not because you have no other choices, because all of them do like that, but it's because when you're shooting a portrait at f1.4, you're usually placing your subject in the center of the frame, and then you want to draw attention to the eyes. You want to draw attention to what's placed in the center of the image. So the fact that there's a little bit of vignetting and the corners aren't as sharp, it doesn't really matter. It actually helps in some regards because they help draw attention to the focus of the portrait in this case. So don't be concerned about what I told you when it's at f1.4, because the center where it really matters is already sharp. Your eyes are going to be really, really, really sharp. And we're not talking about shooting charts. We're talking about shooting the real stuff. You're seeing it right now. Every 85mm f1.4 lens show a little bit of fringing and a little bit of flaring and ghosting. When it comes to fringing, this lens is easy to correct. You can only see that in very, very contrasty edges. While flaring sometimes can wash out the image, but it's not dramatic and it's not that different from any other comparable lens in this class. It's something you've come to expect. 85mm f1.4 are bright lenses that tend to suffer from flaring. Once you know how to avoid it, you're not going to be suffering flaring that much. You just need to know. But there's an area where an unapologetically portrait-oriented lenses like these has to excel, and that is bokeh. Now, I already mentioned that the aperture is made of 15 rounded blades, and this should, in theory, provide very smooth bokeh. Well, let me tell you that bokeh you get out of this lens is one of the best that you can find around. It's very smooth, it's very pleasing, it's dreamy, it's really, really, really good. It's one of the best that I've ever found. So you can definitely count on this lens to deliver one of the most delicious bokeh that you can find. For $500, you get a bokeh monster that it's not just a bokeh monster, it's a lens that it's got the full package. It's a very, very good lens when it comes to optical performance. So very, very well done. The autofocus is based off of stepper motors. The stepper motors are basically silent and they're meant to be quick and reliable. And I have to confirm that from an autofocus standpoint, when it comes to pictures, I didn't have any issue. I used it in so many scenarios that if there was an issue, I would have found it. I didn't. It's precise, it's quick, it's the size. There's really nothing to complain when it comes to the autofocusing on this lens when it comes to photos. We're going to talk about video in a second. So all in all, it's not only a very well-built lens, it's a lens that delivers very good performance from an optical standpoint and from an autofocus standpoint. Now, this lens is meant to be a very good lens for video as well. And one hint is that Sirui provided us with a declickable aperture, which helps changing the exposure in a smooth way rather than going by clicks. So that should be a hint that tells you this lens is also built with video in mind. And what I can tell you is that, like as usual, if the image quality is good for photos, it's going to be more than good for videos. The one thing that differentiates video-oriented lenses is the way autofocus does, the focus breathing, the reliability of the autofocus, and the focus transitions. What I've experienced with this lens is that the autofocus is relatively good, is pretty good actually. Of course, it's not the fastest autofocus of the world, but no 85mm f1.4 are super fast, so you should not expect that. But when it finds a subject, it's very decisive. The focus transition are very smooth. I like them a lot. A little bit of focus breathing, but it becomes very visible once you go from minimum focusing distance to infinity. And it's something you basically never do with an 85mm. And there's one thing that I notice is that once you focus at the minimum, almost close to the minimum focusing distance, and you're trying to autofocus on the background. If the background there's no very precise area with contrast that you're trying to focus on, sometimes the autofocus can struggle, while when you're focusing on something that has a very defined contrast, there's no issues with that. This is the only downside that I found, but it's a use case that you will never. I cannot think of a moment where I would go from the minimum to the background where there's no contrast in the background. Realistically, when you're doing video, you're not going to do that. So although there's a minor issue, is basically negligible from a real world use case scenario. So in conclusion, at $499, which is its launch price, it's basically a no-brainer. If you're looking for an 85mm portrait lens, in my opinion, this is it. You shouldn't look at those 85 1.8 because for the price, the size, and the weight, this beats all of them, and it makes a lot more sense. And I've used this lens for personal stuff, for concerts, for portraiture, professional portraiture. I've used it for a lot of things, and I've never been let down by the results that I got out of this lens. And this tells you a lot, especially on a 61 megapixel sensor camera. You should be able to find something to complain, and I couldn't. And again, we're talking about a $499 launch price. It's really that good. It gets you very good image quality, very good build quality, a lot of features, wonderful bokeh. It's got the whole package. Very good for photos, very good for video. You don't really leave anything behind if you're going out with this lens and relying on this lens. This is, to me, one of those lenses that you can just consider bringing a 16 to 35 and this one, or just a 35 and this one, and just go out with two lenses. You're gonna get a lot of stuff done, and you're gonna love the results that you get out of this lens. I'm impressed with what Sirui has done with this lens, and I cannot wait to see what's behind the corner when it comes to the future of this Aurora, which I believe it's a series of lenses. So I hope they're gonna keep doing lenses like this. Let's see what they have in the future. I don't know. I'm just speculating that this is a series of lenses. Probably they're gonna come out with a 35, a 50, but I want them to be bold. I want them to come with something even more difficult and more challenging, because it looks like they've managed to achieve very good results with this lens. I'm very, very, very impressed. That's it for today, guys. I hope you liked the video. If you did, leave me a thumbs up. If you aren't subscribed, think about subscribing. It helps my channel a lot. Ciao, and I'll see you in the next one.